All right, welcome to episode 3 of the Prez podcast. So happy to have everyone here that is going to be watching, and I'm just thankful to have the opportunity to do this again, and for everybody to watch the first 2 episodes and provided info and comments and stuff like that. I really appreciate it and still working on this. But let's get into it. Today we're going to do a Super Bowl review. We did our preview last Friday, and I enjoyed the game. I hope everybody did. Hope we had a great time. And first, I wanted to say Super Bowl 57 was a great game, and we've been pretty blessed the last 10 years of good Super Bowls. If you go back 10 years, sure, 48, 50, uh, 53, 55 were duds, but the other 6 have been great. This year's Super Bowl, last year's Super Bowl. We've had a lot of good finishes, a lot of close games, really enjoyable Super Bowls. When I was a kid in my formative years, if you go through mid 80s to mid 90s, there was a 10-year stretch where we had 2 good Super Bowls out of 10. I got to watch the Broncos get beat up by the Giants, the Redskins, and the 49ers, just demolish them. I got to watch the Bills get demolished in 3 out of 4 Super Bowls. The 49ers crushing the Chargers. We had 2 good Super Bowls. Bills, Giants, 49ers, and the Bengals in that 10-year span, 2 years. Took John Elway actually showing up to the Super Bowl with a good team against the Packers for us to get a good Super Bowl. So we've been pretty blessed, and this was another great game, and it was super awesome production, really rough fun to watch. I thought Rihanna at halftime was fantastic. I'm a big fan of having not a lot of cameos, and it was Rihanna Super Bowl. She didn't need to have anybody else come on stage. I know people were asking for Calvin Harris or Jay-Z. Didn't need it. Rihanna was great. The platform stuff was great. I thought her performance was great, so I really enjoyed it. But let's get into the game. I'm gonna break this down. I'm gonna do what happened in the game, and I'm gonna talk about 5 key moments that happened in this game that I really think were integral in how this game was won. It was a really close game. Could have gone either way. Obviously, the Eagles had a 10-point lead at halftime. Generally speaking, when you have a 10-point lead at halftime in the Super Bowl, you win. Only other team to lose a 10-point lead at halftime is the infamous Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowl 51. So doesn't happen very often, but there's a few moments, key moments in the game that I really want to focus on that I think are super important and I think really kind of made the game what it was. So let me start with those. First one. So both teams go down the field, score touchdowns, first drive, second drive. Next drive, Philly goes 3 and out. Casey gets the ball. They're driving. They get to about the 25, 30-yard line. I think it was the 25. And it's 4th and 3. Now, you didn't look like you could stop them. I know you just got a 3 and out against the Eagles, but I thought going in that both teams would be really aggressive. As we know, the Eagles were very aggressive on 4th down. Many times they did their patented rugby smash QB sneak that worked to perfection many times in this game. But I thought that the Chiefs would also be aggressive, and I thought there was a mistake there by the Chiefs to not go for it on 4th and 3. You're close to the red zone. You're not giving the ball back in a really good position in the middle of the field. It's not like you're close to punting. I know it's reasonably easy to kick, and this is not a results-based analysis. I just feel like you need to be aggressive early and put Philly behind. I really wanted to see how they would respond. We'll get to that later of being in a deficit and how they would respond and put their defense on their heels and make their offense feel a little pressure early in this game. But they said they'd like to kick a field goal. And we know Butker misses a 42-yarder, hits the left upright. Those who had that in their prop bets got a nice payout on the doink there. I was just kind of surprised with Andy Reid's decision. So the Eagles get the ball back. As we know, they go down and score a touchdown, make it 14-7. And then comes our second key moment in the game. So the Eagles are moving the ball pretty well at this point, especially in the first half. They're moving pretty consistently. There was only 4 total punts in this game. I had to look that stat up about the punts because I was really, really surprised to see how many punts happened in this game. So for there to be 4 punts in this game, I don't remember. I watched the whole game. I was pretty into the whole game, the Super Bowl, but there was 4 punts. Really, it didn't feel like there was 4 punts, but there was. Anyways, 14-7. There was a few times where Spagnuolo, Kansas City's defensive coordinator, really timed up some really key blitz packages, and this is one of them. It didn't cause the fumble, but I'm sure Hurts was aware of it. He drops the ball Nick Bolton picks it up, returns it for a touchdown, makes the game 14-14. Now, this is a big point. Like I said, they didn't go for it earlier, but it keeps the Chiefs in it because in the first half, the Eagles dominated time of possession. Even though they give it this fumble, tied up 14-14, what does the Eagles do? They go down and score another touchdown to make it 21-14, force the Chiefs to punt, get a field goal before the end of the half, and they're up 10, 24-14 in halftime. So that fumble doesn't happen. What's the score we're looking at halftime? Is it a bigger lead? Is it a bigger score? It really helped the Chiefs stay in it so they're not in too big of a deficit going into the third quarter. Next moment I thought was big was that, and I talked about this at halftime, is I thought the net first drive, Chiefs get the ball, they have to go down and score a touchdown. They can't go 3 and out. They can't go down 3 scores, right? 10's a dicey number, right? If you don't get any points in that situation and the Eagles somehow get another touchdown, now you're down 3 scores. Being down 17 points is rough, right? So it was really, really important drive, and Andy Reid's play calling, full effect, go down, score touchdown, make it 24-21. Huge for the Chiefs' chances in the second half. Really needed a score there. And I mean, even a field goal would have been good just to keep you guys within striking distance. You're not down, chance to go down 3 scores, like I said. So that drive coming out after halftime, huge to keep the Chiefs in it. Like I said, got down to 24-21. Next one, fourth quarter. As we know, Chiefs didn't get stopped in the second half. They really came out gangbusters. Their drives were touchdown, field goal to end the game, obviously, in the second half. But there was a 3 and out that the Eagles had that really put them behind the 8 ball. And they had a 3 and out in the first half, but they had a 3 and out in the second half. And that 3 and out was interesting because it was on 3 passes, 3 straight passes. Now, you look at their stats and you go like, they had a decent day running the football. The key is, though, that they were only able to run the ball for 45 yards on 17 carries from the running backs. Kind of flies under the radar, but they weren't able to run the ball standard. And I think Steichen, who's now the new Colts head coach, he wanted to put pressure with the passing game. And unfortunately, 3 straight, give the ball back to Kansas City. Kansas City goes down, makes the score 35-27. And that was a really big flipping point. If they can go back and keep the pressure on Kansas City and not have a 3 and at least get a few first downs, kind of bleed that clock, maybe get some points out of it, could be a different ending for the Eagles. But I thought that 3 and out was pretty big. And the play calling, and that was pretty big. Chiefs also dialed up a blitz there late that forced Hurts to roll out naked backwards. He wasn't able to get a pass downfield to anybody open. They were able to keep contained. Sometimes earlier in the game they weren't. Obviously, we know he had 70 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. An amazing game by Jalen Hurts. We'll get to that later. But anyways, thought that was a really big moment. And then there's the biggest moment of the game that people all talk about. And I know it's a key moment, and it's unfortunate on how it was viewed. We're talking about the holding on James Bradbury on Juju Smith-Schuster. And I want to talk about this and, from an objective way and look at it as I know it wasn't being called. It was the first holding call game. I love the fact that there was only 9 penalties called in this game. I thought it was a pretty clean game. It sucks to have a penalty called like that. Everybody remembers the penalty called on Logan Wilson on holding on Cooper Kupp on 3rd down late in the Super Bowl 56 last year that kind of had an effect on that game. Not a lot of controversy on that call. I'm guessing maybe because the face mask T. Higgins pulled off on James Ramsey on Jalen Ramsey for his 75-yard touchdown reception earlier in that game. So maybe that was a balancing act there as far as feeling like that was a crucial penalty. I know people were really up in arms because this was a great game to have it decided by the penalty. The unfortunate thing is the way that play went down. So they are not playing a safety high in that side and in that defense, right? Juju runs an inside-out motion, right? He comes in, he cuts out, and he's trying to release high and out, right? So Mahomes sees this. He throws the ball way overhead. And, quarterbacks are taught, if you see a clear defensive penalty but not a flag, throw it in the area and draw attention to it. If that's option 1, draw attention to it. That's what Mahomes did. And as we know, the way the umpires and refs are lined up, there's a side judge. And then when you're in the red zone, there's a judge that's lined up on the pylon. The one that was on the pylon, he's the one that threw the flag. And unfortunately, the only angle we got on the broadcast was that one angle where it looks like not a lot of holding is going on. I was able to find something on Twitter where it shows that James Bradbury has a full handful of Juju's jersey as he comes out of that break. Now, with no safety over the top, if he comes out of that break and Bradbury's trailing, that's an easy throw from Mahomes to Juju. Not sure if he makes the catch or makes the play on it, but obviously we know why Bradbury's making that hold. He knows he's on an island. He knows he has no help over the top. And the best part about it is after the game, when he's asked in the locker room, he's interviewed, he owns up to it. So I really respect him for his accountability and taking that, in that moment. It's unfortunate the game ended that way. It was a great game, but I think too much is being emphasized on that play. I did put it in my key moment of the game because it's something a lot of people are talking about. But if the Eagles want to look back at why they lost this football game, there's a lot of things they can point to. One being that they didn't stop the Chiefs at all in the second half. Like I said, their drives in the second half were touchdown, 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 field goal. So there's a few other things they could have figured out, obviously, and there's a few other things we'll talk about as far as what happened in this football game. But that's something I wanted to cover. And of course, after that, a really smart play. Jared McKinnon goes down at the 1. They do a kneel. They draw some time off the clock. They get it centered. Bucker kicks it, gives the Eagles only one chance. And unfortunately, Hurts gets his arm hit, and the Hail Mary falls way short. And that's the game. And that's 38-35 Chiefs over the Eagles, Super Bowl 57. Great game. A lot of great plays. And I'll go over some stuff I thought about for each team that was kind of really, really interesting to me. First thing, we'll do the Chiefs first, right? Their ability to run the ball was super surprising, right? So they had 158 yards rushing, and Mahomes had only 182 yards passing. If you would have told me going into that game that not only would the Chiefs have more rushing yards than the Eagles, the game was this close, and Mahomes would only have 182 yards passing, I told you crazy. I'm like, what's going on? But that seemed like that was the game plan for the Eagles. They were playing, a deeper look. They didn't want to get beat deep. They were going to force Mahomes and his act. They were really hoping they would get pressure. And that, Mahomes got the MVP, and he's the best player in the world, and I got it. But the offensive line play for the Chiefs in this football game, unbelievable. As we all know, Eagles had no sacks. They were talked about as this amazing pass rush, led the league in sacks, led the league in pressures. They did get a few pressures on Mahomes. Obviously, the pressure on the big 26-yard run he had on the final drive, which was huge. But they didn't get close to sacking him. They didn't get close. In fact, the Kansas City Chiefs did have 2 sacks, but that's just because Jalen ran out of bounds and didn't throw the ball away on rollouts where he couldn't find the target. I mean, it was like 1-yard losses, and they're technically sacks and got awarded to the closest defender. But there wasn't really any true sacks in this football game by 2 decent pass rushes. But his offensive line play was amazing in this football game. But the offensive line play, especially for the Chiefs, was phenomenal. And part of that is due to the play calling. And I want to really focus on Andy Reid's play calling. There was a lot of different looks they get through at the Eagles. There's a few specific plays. We talked about it on Friday about his ability to use the jet sweep and how McCole Horman being out was going to be unfortunate. But Andy Reid, he studies. He knows his stuff. So the really interesting thing about this was they got in the red zone twice. And we know that the Eagles are going to be aware of the creativity the Chiefs have in the red zone. And they ran Kadarius Toney out wide. He goes in motion like he's going to go do a jet sweep like they do with McCole Harmon or some kind of action like that. Ball's height and immediately pivots back to where he started, wide open, because the Eagles overcompensated. So he's just left wide open. And what do they do again? They do it later again to Sky Moore. Same result. But beautiful play calling, taking advantage of tendencies. And it's really interesting. If you look up what happened way back in week 1, Ben Johnson called the same kind of action against the Eagles in week 1 in their 38-35 loss to the Eagles at home. Ben Johnson, the OC for the Lions, called that same kind of stuff. Also, another disciple of Andy Reid, everybody remembers Doug Peterson. He ran similar action against the Eagles as well in their matchup. The Jaguars lost that game, but he ran the same thing. So he picked up a few tricks, and he was afraid. But the great thing about it, there's this wonderful clip of Peter King interviewing Andy Reid. Peter Green, noted as journalist for the Sports Illustrated, asking him about that play. And true Andy Reid fashion, that play is called corn dog. Corn dog. That's the play call. And Peter King is like, oh, that's called corn dog. He doesn't call it corn dog in the huddle, right? Yeah, no, he calls corn dog in the huddle. He says corn dog. That's what he said. He says corn dog. Which is great. But those plays were huge. Getting wide open people without even 10 yards of space within the 5 yard line. It's really uncommon, especially in the Super Bowl when you're playing against a top-rated defense like the Eagles, especially the number one in rated pass defense. So very, very interesting stuff. There was also the third and short where they ran back in a split back set, and they run it wide. Pacheco gets a big run, almost broke it. If he maybe hurdles that last defender, he maybe break it for a touchdown. But to do a sweep out of a split back set, it's not something you see very often in today's NFL. Caught the Eagles off guard. They sealed the edge. Pacheco was wide open on the run coming around. Another big play. So a lot of good coaching in this game. Anyways, another thing for Kansas City. That's it. That's it. Let's go to the Eagles. All right, Eagles. There's a lot of talk about Jalen Hurts and question marks with him. He wasn't really tested in the playoffs. His shoulder, I even questioned it. I wasn't sure how good his shoulder was. His accuracy had dipped a little bit since injury against Chicago. Any questions you had about Jalen Hurts' ability, his mental fortitude? I don't know what you're questioning about. The man had an amazing, amazing game. Just an amazing game. 300 yards passing, 70 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns rushing. Ties Terrell Davis for the most rushing touchdowns in a Super Bowl. Deep ball to A.J. Brown for score. Deep ball to Devontae Smith. It's wide open. Just great passing. And that pass to Goddard that got reviewed and then was kept a catch. A ridiculous throw. He knows the underneath coverage is there. He sees it. He's looking at it. It's not like he doesn't see that guy. He throws it. Yeah, throws it where Goddard can high point it, only where he can get it because it's 3rd and 14. Needs that catch to keep the drive going. Just a ridiculous throw. Ridiculous throw. He played amazing. And, it's unfortunate the fumble. I'm sure he's going to be on himself about that fumble because that's the kind of guy he is. He's really, and he's analytical and a good leader. But it'll be really interesting to see what they do with him long term. Contract wise, obviously they've got a lot of stuff. They've got a really interesting mix on their roster of young players, old players, and they're gonna have to start paying some guys. So, Javon Hargrave is obviously a free agent, and they've got some decisions to make. But any questions you had about Jalen Hurts and his ability as a quarterback, which is kind of crazy because of the year he had, but obviously there was questions about his competition. I brought that up on the podcast about. They haven't played a lot of great teams, a lot of great quarterbacks this year, being in the NFC. They just schedule-wise, they kind of got lucky with that. I was really impressed. I thought he was really decisive and he made decisions quickly. He wasn't holding the ball long. His decision-making was on point. I don't know how many. I think he made one turnover-worthy play, and unfortunately, that one turnover-worthy play resulted in a touchdown. So that's unfortunate, but I think he's got a good career out of him, and Nick Sirianni loves him. So it'll be really curious, though, contract-wise, what they do with Jalen Hurts going forward. Like I talked earlier before, I was really surprised about the Eagles' inability to run on standard run plays. They really have a great offensive line, but they, like I said, only 45 yards on 17 carries from the running back position, as they platoon. Sanders had 7 carries. I think Gainwell had 7. Boston's got 3. So really surprising that they weren't able to run the ball effectively. A lot of times those runs were stuffed. Now, the Chiefs were stacking the box. They were keeping everything within the frame, meaning in between the tackles. As we know, the Eagles rely heavy on their offensive line, don't do a lot of big sets, not a lot of 2 tight end sets. So they're really running out of the same formation, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 back. That's their standard personnel. So most of the run plays happen against that. So the Chiefs really wanted to focus on stopping that, and they did. And that was their game plan. They really shut down that run. Now, they did give up some big plays down the field. Obviously, the A.J. Brown touchdown, the Devontae Smith 46-yarder. Goddard had a lot of plays over the middle. So they were giving up some things. They were trying to keep both their safeties high, but they were keeping a lot of guys close to the line of scrimmage, and it paid off. Uh, it paid off. It really slowed down that run game. Now, it's crazy to give a compliment to a defense that gave up 35 points. It could have given up more, but I really thought it was an important part of the game. And then, we're talking about game plans. Uh, the one coordinator that I wasn't really excited about with the game plan was the defensive coordinator for the Eagles. So you play, like I said, you play too high safety high, but you're seeing that they took advantage. I know you don't want Mahomes to beat you, but you really didn't adjust as the Chiefs really started to run that ball in the second half. Really took advantage of some interesting sets. Now they don't run the ball standard like standard team. They do a lot of different runs and stuff like that, but they were running the ball a lot in between the tackles, more so than the Chiefs regularly do. Yeah, mainly because of how the defense was lined up. And I didn't see a lot of adjustments from the Eagles defense in the second half to really try to slow down Mahomes and the run game. They didn't really create a lot of extra pressure on Mahomes in passing situations, but he wasn't put in a lot of third and long situations. Like I said, Mahomes only had 182 yards passing. He didn't need to because of their ability to run football. So I would have liked to see the Eagles change it up a little bit, maybe get close to the box, put more pressure on the receivers, bump them a little harder, and really try to get in Mahomes' face more because their standard pass rush wasn't doing it, wasn't getting there. So I would have loved to see that change from him, and maybe it would have had a different outcome. Not sure, but not really a huge fan of their game plan. And that's all I have for the Eagles. I would like to talk about what this means for these two franchises going forward. For the Chiefs, it's scary to think because everything that happened this offseason, there's no Tyrann Mathieu on defense. He plays for the Saints. They got rid of Sorensen. Not really the greatest player on defense, but they really revamped their secondary. And of course, we all know about the Tyreek Hill trade. They traded Tyreek Hill. They couldn't afford him, especially with the money he wanted. So they trade for him, and they take those draft picks and they turn it into a lot of young defensive players. And then I think about their offensive line. Remember their Super Bowl 55, they got demolished. Obviously, they had a lot of second unit guys there, but they had Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz and stuff like that on their offensive line, and they're gone. Those guys are gone. So they replaced it. They traded for Orlando Brown Jr. You got him at left tackle, but they drafted Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. They signed Joe Tooney. They have made a lot of strides to make their team not only younger but cheaper. And they obviously have to think about what they're going to do with Orlando Brown Jr. He's going to want a bunch of money, knowing him, and he just helped them win a Super Bowl. But also at their skill positions, you're playing Kelsey, but you're not paying Tony a lot of money. You're not playing Juju Smith a lot of money. You're not paying MVS a lot of money. You're not playing Sky Moore a lot of money. So Pacheco's on a rookie deal. Like all these players that they got McKinnon on a nice veteran contract. All these skilled players that work around Mahomes in this offensive line, their offense, scary as to say, because they have so much youth, could possibly be better next year, which is interesting. And then you think about their defense. They drafted George Kalafdis, who had a great year, defensive end. They drafted Trent McDuffie. They have Watson. They have these young corners that are going to be seasoned now. So their defense, there's a QP. Chris Jones is not getting any younger, but their linebackers and their secondary, and they've added depth. They've got quite the youth movement going on, and a team that's been to 5 straight AFC title games, 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls, looking like they're going to get better, which is scary because Patrick Mahomes is 27. He's not 37. He's 27. I know he has 2 Super Bowl MVPs, 2 regular season MVPs, 2 Super Bowl rings, and he's 27. And Andy Reid is still his head coach. So if you're tired of seeing the Chiefs, I don't know what to tell you. We're going to be seeing them around for a long time, and their roster, the way it's built, is going to be something that's going to be pretty steady. So I just feel like we're going to be seeing them not only in the playoffs, more AFC title games, more Super Bowls in the next 5 years, based on how they've constructed the roster. So their GM Brett Veach deserves a lot of credit for the way he handled this offseason and how he's handled everything that happened since Super Bowl 55, because they've had a lot of roster changeover since then. So credit to them. Credit to the way they're building stuff around Mahomes. And you know what? Also credit to Mahomes. He signed his big deal, but he's not making $50 million a year. That's Aaron Rodgers. That's Russell Wilson. They weren't in the playoffs. So he's not taking, he's not taking bottom money, but he's not taking top dollar either. He gave him some flexibility. It's a lesson learned from Tom Brady. Tom Brady was never the top paid quarterback. The guy that won 7 Super Bowls was never the top paid quarterback in the league, ever. Because he wanted to win. It did help that he had a supermodel wife and Giselle that helped pay the bills, right? Made more money than him. But you got to be smart with this cap stuff. And then the cap is going to increase, and you got to think long term. And I get it. Get your bag. I know that's the phrase. Get paid. You don't own the owners, anything. It's their responsibility. But is there a big difference between $300 million and $400 million once become a millionaire? I don't think so. I don't think so. So think about that, quarterbacks. Think about that. All right, next, the Eagles. Now, the Eagles, they got a lot more questions when it comes to free agency. They got a lot of free agents. Like I talked about, Javon Hargraves, free agent, Fletcher Cox, free agent. They've got questions about Jason Kelsey's future and Lane Johnson's future. Lane Johnson's going to have surgery on his torn groin muscle, which, by the way, what a trooper. Got hurt late in the season, played every snap in the playoffs and the Super Bowl, and was outstanding. But he's 32, and core muscle injuries, surgeries suck. He'll probably be back and healthy by the fall. He's still under contract, Lane Johnson. But he's 32. How many good years he has left. Interesting. But Kelsey is 35, just having the baby. Kids are small. He had thought about retiring before Hurts had talked to him into coming back for another year, and it was good. Got to play in another Super Bowl, and it was a chance to win it. So, but he's got to think about if he's going to retire too. He's 35. And then there's Fletcher Cox. Like I said, he's a free agent too. He's 32. Been a stalwart on your defense for many years. Been a leader on that defense for many years. But you've got to pay some guys. James Bradbury is a free agent. Gardner Johnson's a free agent. Javon Hargrave is a free agent. These are young guys. Are you going to keep Fletcher around? So they've got a lot more questions. And also, there's the news today that not only did they lose their offensive coordinator to be the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, they lost their defensive coordinator, Gannon, to be the new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. We'll talk more about those hires on our next pod. I don't want to dive too deep into that, but it really affects the Eagles going forward. You got to replace both coordinators, and you're behind in the hiring cycle. That's the part that sucks about being a Super Bowl team, is when you get pillaged, when you get picked apart for coaching hires after Super Bowl. A lot of the other coaching coordinator positions have already been filled by good candidates. Would they have loved to have brought in maybe Kellen Moore to replace them? Who knows? But now sometimes you promote from within. You promote a QB coach. You promote a defensive line coach to be your new OC or DC, and maybe they'll do that. I'm not sure. I haven't dove too far deep into their coaching tree. But Sirianni's only in his second year, so it'll be interesting to see what they do to replace those guys. But it's going to be a big factor. And sometimes when coordinator leaves and you have free agents, that can affect where those free agents go. So I don't think we're going to see the same Eagles team we saw this year. Obviously, their schedule is going to be a little more difficult. The NFC doesn't look like right now it's going to be any tougher. The AFC is the tougher conference by far, especially at the quarterback position. But a lot can change in the offseason. We don't know where Aaron Rodgers is going. We don't know where David Carr is going. So there's a lot of things up in the air. And the Cowboys are still in the division. The Cowboys still have a good team and Dak. So it's not a guarantee that they'll be back in the championship game next year or in this situation again, which makes this loss even tougher. Like I said, with some of the veterans on that team and question marks about them. But there's a lot of things to like. You have Jalen Hurts. You got A.J. Brown under contract. You got Devontae Smith. You've got some other young pieces on your roster on defense and on offense. So there's a lot to be excited for, but there's a lot of question marks too, more than Kansas City has. So it'll be really, really interesting to see what happens going forward for them as a franchise. But like I said earlier, I enjoyed this game and good. We've been spoiled with good Super Bowls, and this was another good Super Bowl. Don't focus on that penalty too much. There's a lot of other key moments in the game that could have gone a different way, that could have affected the outcome. It's hard to blame it on one play. I just think it's in that moment it goes under the microscope as a huge play. So don't blame Mr. Bradbury for the call, the refs for that call. They had to make it. There's a great angle, like I said, of Bradbury holding onto that jersey big time, and that's why the holding was called. So it's unfortunate we just didn't get to see Mahomes throw a touchdown pass to win that game in the last minute or whatever, but it is what it is. It is what it is. So Kansas City are Super Bowl champs. They win their third Super Bowl along with Super Bowl 54 and Super Bowl 4, their third title. But that's all I have. We'll do another podcast probably on Friday, do another live one on Friday. We'll start moving into our NFL offseason stuff. What we're going to be doing with that, unsure. But we'll have something to go in there. Obviously, there's the draft coming up in April. There's a free agency period. And there's a lot of stuff we can go over, a lot of teams that need a lot of work that aren't the Kansas City Chiefs. And a lot of change always happens in the season. We'll get more NBA talk. Obviously, as we get down, we got the All-Star game coming in for the NBA. We got a lot going on there, and the rest of the NBA season. And then, people want me to discuss baseball stuff, talk baseball stuff. I can, and I do follow it. So we'll see. We'll see how this grows and how this changes. What other sports we want to bring in and discuss. But again, thanks for watching. And like I said, we'll do something again on Friday. Have a good rest of the week.